Bikeability Trust. Really looking forward to seeing what's going to be presented in this set of presentations. Obviously, with the current events with COVID-19, there's been huge amounts of work, not just in transport as a whole, but very specifically looking at schools and everything else going on. So there's been lots of work going on behind the scenes. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you today. We are looking to obviously start straight away, and we're going to aim to finish by 11:30. Nick, if you could advance the next slide. Fantastic. So just as I mentioned at the start, for those of you that are here, microphones and cameras, please can you ensure that your microphones are muted and cameras are turned off? That would be appreciated. That's just to support the connection of people's devices. And if you can do that, that'd be great. Equally, it'll allow you to see, should allow you to see the speakers that are presenting in addition to the slides that are on the screen at the moment. Hopefully you can all see the slides. Questions, like I said, we'll be allocating time after each presentation, kind of in the standard format that we do with Modeshift Convention. Obviously, we can't run around a room with a microphone here, so we're going to be using the chat feature, like I mentioned, and also the raise your hand feature that we have there. Presentations, yes, we will be sharing them. You've signed up to the autumn webinar mailing list, so we'll be able to send those to you, and we are recording the webinar. So please bear that in mind, and that's another request why we ask you to disable your camera on there. So just to make you aware you are, this webinar is being recorded. Could you advance the slide, Nick, please? So about Modeshift, hopefully you all know what we're about, but here's a little recap. There's a fantastic picture from the Modeshift convention last year where we could all be within 1 meter of each other and sit around a table. But Modeshift is a not-for-profit organisation. We're all about our membership, about the industry, sharing best practice, and ultimately supporting sustainable travel. We work with the travel professionals from across the country in a range of different settings. And what Modeshift is all about is to bring people together to share best practice and also recognise the good work that's been taking place, and we do that through the national awards. We also have Modeshift Stars, and Nick will be talking later about Modeshift Stars, but we also have Modeshift Stars, which is the Centre of Excellence for travel planning, and we deliver that across education and business and community settings. There's a huge amount of work going on there, and I'm sure Nick will share that with you. Thank you. So about today, first presentation is going to be Nick Butler, and it's all around the theme, time to transform the school run. Then we're going to go into some questions, followed by Chris Bennett from Sustrans, who's making active travel to school the new normal. And we're going to have Stephen Edwards from Living Streets talking about the importance of what school. And then we're going to close with Bikeability Trust with their autumn term update. There's been a lot of work going on, and Emily Cherry will be sharing that with us. Like I say, questions for each of those presentations will be done in turn. And what we'll do is I'll hand over to the presenter. They will go through their presentation, and then I'll take back control of the for the questions. And then what I'll do is I'll chair the questions section of people on there. And like I say, we will get through as many as we can. Okay, next slide, Nick, please. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nick from the Modeshift Stars team, and he's going to be talking about transforming the school run. Over to you, Nick.
Cool, thanks, Adam. Hopefully you can hear me okay, all coming through. Good stuff. So I've got a very short amount of time to go through lots of information. It's really a top level overview of what Modeshift have been doing over the last few months, but also some of the national things that you can be aware of. So I've included links for you to follow up on afterwards, but it certainly is despite everything that's going on, it is certainly an exciting time for travel to school, with it getting so much focus at the moment. The first thing to say is that Stars is absolutely open for business. We've not had any downtime over the last few months. We've continued to deliver Stars accreditation. The team's been in place to keep things going, and I'm delighted to say that's resulted in lots of activity on the Stars system. So from January through to July, we've seen over 3,700 travel initiatives delivered in the system. Obviously, many of those will be working with the partners you'll hear from today, Sustrans, Living Streets and Bikeability Trust. But there are over 140 initiatives now in the STAR system, and we're seeing that schools can select from that and we're seeing lots of schools still active over these times. The other good news is that there's more accreditation applications come in. So even though schools have been on reduced numbers of pupils attending, we saw 115 schools apply for accreditation over the summer, and that actually edged us over the 1,500 schools that have achieved accreditation. Between them, they've applied for about 2,300 different accreditations since the scheme started as well. We've also added a new staff member over the last few months. So Kathy Fryer, she's in the background managing access to this webinar at the moment. But Kathy is the new face of the team now and will be around for any queries you have. So with the expansion of the scheme, we've had that need to sort of grow our team as well, so we can offer you the same levels of support you used to. And even more good news is that we've seen more and more local authorities join us in the last few months as well. So welcome to Cornwall Council, Oxfordshire Council, Redcar and Cleveland and Walsall Council. We're seeing similar growth with the Modeshift Stars business scheme as well, with lots of new local authorities joining us, looking at how travel planning can support the recovery from the current health situation. Quick updates in terms of what we've seen nationally. So there's been lots of stuff from the DFT. What's been quite nice, if you look in the bottom left corner there, is that their message has been nice and simple. Walk, cycle or scoot to school wherever you can. And I'm sure all the partners on the call today will agree with that messaging. That there is actually a link to that infographic that's on the slide here, and there's a whole load of other infographics. If you've not seen them so far, you can download them and use them for your own campaigns as well. Something else that the DFT did recently, just before the schools restarted, was send a self-assessment tool for all local authorities to look at how pupils are travelling to school, what sort of infrastructure is in place. So you may or may not have seen that. It might have gone to heads of transport or to education teams, but that gave opportunities, the local authorities, the opportunity to do a self-assessment of what position they were in for the return to school. Coupled with that was a travel demand management toolkit, which you should also be able to get access to. And some local authorities have been successful in getting travel demand management grants as well, so that they can provide extra support to schools at the moment in this time. The DFT also sent a letter out, which actually preceded the DFT letter, and basically they're putting emphasis on local action, so local authorities to look at promoting active travel, some funding to contract additional coaches and dedicated school transport services where that's going to be an issue for schools. Looking at reducing the demand for other public transport, which then links to the DFT's travel demand management toolkits and funding. Staggering school start and finish times, which many schools seem to be doing now. But also saying that in some areas we're just going to have to accept an increase in car use in the short term whilst people get used to the new normal. I didn't want to say that term, but there it is, it's come out. Also, we saw changes to the Traffic Management Act, which everyone will be aware of, the Emergency Active Travel Fund, but there's some really strong wording in there around school streets and the promotion of school streets. I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about that through the rest of this webinar as well. But there's a link through to that guidance in the Traffic Management Act there for anyone who wants to check that out further. For us, that's super exciting, because whilst school travel planning's been happening for a long time, generally the focus has been on the more positive things. And this chart or this graphic, if you like, that's on the screen now, is something that we use in our Modeshift training courses, and that emphasizes that Modeshift Stars is all about getting the package right in terms of achieving that modal shift. And for years we've been great at doing the positive stuff, so building in better infrastructure for walking and cycling, putting information in place for the benefits of walking and cycling, and giving people incentives. What we've not been as good at, and not through fault of not through any lack of trying, is doing the negative stuff that disincentivizes driving and single occupancy or single family car use specifically. But we're in an exciting place now that we've not been before, where we've actually got the funding, the political will, the public support to actually do things like taking space away from cars, putting in school streets, making pavements wider. So we are in a unique opportunity which we need to grasp with both hands and work as this team Modeshift to make sure that we make the most of it. So you'll surely have seen that lots of school streets are now popping up across England. A couple of images there showing the Solihull schemes. The one over on the right happening in Leeds. Recently we heard that Cambridgeshire have got 7 new schemes up and running. Hackney have managed to do over 40 new schemes in response to COVID as well. So they are really cropping up all over. And there's a link there to the Birmingham schemes as well, where they've got a few different variations. We will be coming back with another School Streets webinar in a couple of months' time, where we'll be sharing the very latest of what's happening there. Our response, whilst we absolutely promote School Streets and support School Streets, and we have our own training courses on it, we do recognise that it's just not possible for every single school in the country to get one set up quickly for various reasons. So what we did as an immediate response as Modeshift was set up our Stay Safe, Get Active campaign, which basically has a new function in STARS Education where any registered user, be it a local authority or a school level user, can log into the system and generate a free 5-minute walking bubble map. And our aim is for every school in the country, or as many schools as possible, to log in and create one of these bubbles. And we're delighted to have passed the 500 mark last week. We're already pushing towards 550 now as well. So it's been really successful in the first few weeks. A quick example of what the bubble looks like once it's been created here. So the school's name is auto-populated onto the map. And then on the right side, you'll see we've kept the messaging super simple, similar to the DFT. So there's 3 messages in there: protect our children, if possible, walk, cycle or scoot to school. And if you have to drive, park at least 5 minutes away. But that, so the bubble map itself is free for schools to create, but we have teamed up with Bright Kids for schools to be able to create physical walking bubbles as well. And we've seen lots of these resources now getting installed at schools around the country. Cambridge County Council have actually asked for extra stuff, so there's now walking bubble gazebos and other resources. And Durham County Council actually have their own personalised page on the Bright Kids website where the council is paying for these resources, but the schools can log in and select which of the resources they want to install. So if you want to have a look at those, do head over to the Bright Kids website to see what resources are available as well. Stats to finish off with for now, and these, for those of you working in school travel already, you'll be super familiar with these figures. It's the National Travel Survey, and obviously there's more up-to-date figures now, but this is the 2017 National Travel Survey. And what it shows is that over time, since 1995, walking to school levels haven't changed dramatically. There's a 3 percentage point drop over that time. It is a drop, obviously, which is of a concern. The bigger concern is the car use figure, and you'll see that's gone from 30 percentage points to 35 percentage points, and those 2 lines together. And what we want to avoid is those two lines crossing over. Obviously, the DFT have their target for primary schools that walking to school levels increase to 55% by 2025. So hopefully we'll see more focus on that over the next 5 years, so we can work together to achieve that target. So you'll generally be aware of those figures, but what I'm bringing back here now is some older figures, and these are super old. They're 10 years old now from when we were allowed to collect travel to school data in the school census. But the reason I want to share this is to basically share that we do still have lots of potential to increase those levels of walking. With the walking bubbles, with school streets, there's lots of concerns about displacement and where's the car traffic going to go. But these figures on the right show, and just to reiterate again, they are 10 years old, but I doubt they've changed massively over that 10 years, that in 2010, over 330,000 car trips on the journey to school every day were under half a mile. And further, 92,000 of those were less than a quarter of a mile. So school streets, walking bubbles really do have a potential to get a lot of cars off the road. Just in terms of what's coming up next for us, so to give you a quick overview, so in the autumn, very, very soon, we'll be launching our new green and platinum levels of STARS Education Accreditation and STARS Business Accreditation. The new STARS Business system will be launched, and there'll be an email coming out to you, to all registered users shortly, letting you know the next steps of the process for that. And it's going to be very exciting for us having all of our travel plans and all of our accreditation systems in one place with seamless moving between the systems for everyone that's using them. We'll have a whole load of new resources coming, promotional resources, stuff that schools can use as well. A date for your diary, the 4th of December, the National Stars School Travel Awards will be taking place. Normally they take place as a physical event in the Houses of Parliament, but this year we'll be doing a virtual event, which actually has the benefit that all of you guys that are interested can log in and view that event and see what our schools of the region have been up to and who's going to be the National Stars School of the Year for this year. And then finally, we'll be looking out for further government announcements of funding as well. There's the travel demand management funding that's already out there, but obviously 2 billion announced for walking and cycling. The autumn budget's now been cancelled, but hopefully in the spending review, we'll start to hear how that funding is going to be distributed between everyone and what sort of focus there's going to be on school travel as well. So that's it for now. My contact details are on screen if there's any follow-up questions, and I think Adam's going to take over now. We've got a couple of minutes for any immediate questions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nick. Do appreciate that. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the raise your hand feature just at the bottom of the screen there, or type them in the chat. I will just have a look through if there's any questions.
Just point out, Adam, Alison has just shared the Bright Kids link for the Walking Bubble resources.
Yep, so that's just available in the chat there if you'd like to have a look at that as well. And I think on that as well, just there is information on the Modeshift website that you can refer back to as well if you've got any further questions on the walking bubbles. Right, I'm just having a look. Can't actually see any questions there. Just one last check. Okay, so what we'll do.
One question, Adam, was why you didn't warn me, why you didn't highlight that the sun had started shining on my head through the presentation.
I didn't want to interrupt Nick, to be honest. Might want to position. So yeah, thank you very much, Nick. Really appreciated. I'm sure Nick would be happy to answer any questions after the webinar. His contact details well, we're available up on screen there, so please feel free to make a note of those and contact him after the session. Other than that, I think what we'll do is we'll move on to the next presentation. Nick, if you could advance the slides, please. So we're going to hand over to Chris Bennett from Sustrans, and he's going to be presenting on making active travel to school the new normal. Okay, Chris, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. Adam, yeah, you can hear me. Good. It's very strange, isn't it, presenting to a blank screen? Yeah, so my name's Chris Bennett. I'm Head of Behaviour Change and Engagement at Sustrans. This presentation is a bit of a reflection of the current situation we find ourselves in. And so it's Bike to School week next week. So it gives us a bit of a chance as an organisation to think about how we're doing in getting more people cycling to school and also promoting active travel more generally. So we'll have some kind of reflection on the current situation. We've also, as part of Bike to School Week, we carried out some research with YouGov, which has been carried out in the last few weeks. So it's a really kind of up-to-date snapshot of people's attitudes towards school travel. That's going to be released on Monday, but I can give you some exclusive insights today, so a bit of a heads up on those. And I can also talk a little bit about what we've been doing during the lockdown and what we're doing at the moment to support local authorities and schools to encourage active travel to schools. Okay, so we are all well aware of the context we're in, but I thought it was useful just to raise it. I have used that awful phrase, the new normal. In fact, there's a few things that Nick's talked about that I'll build on here. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of synergies between what everybody's thinking at the moment in terms of the potential that we have and the opportunities of the current situation. Obviously, there is lots of downsides of COVID-19 and the hugely detrimental to people's health, the economy and society in lots of ways. So when I'm talking about the opportunities, I don't want to dismiss those, but there is an opportunity for us to create a new normal. I think with the announcement this week, it's clear that if anybody I definitely thought at the back in March that this was going to be a short period of time, and then we would go back. Everything would go back to how it was in 12 weeks, as we were promised, or by Christmas, or whatever we were told at the times. Whereas with the announcements this week, it's clear that this is going to be at least for another 6 months, and the level of change we're experiencing means we won't go back to how we were before. So there is a big opportunity for us to create a new normal and new expectations. So the lockdown demonstrated a latent demand for walking and cycling. There's a big rise in walking and cycling levels, and also huge sales of bikes and demand for bikes and scooters. So it really showed people what could be possible, and the potential, and more widely the potential for behaviour. We're all in the world of behaviour change, and sometimes it can feel very difficult for to create those big shifts in behaviour. As Nick was showing in those graphs, behaviour is relatively constant, but it's in times like this where the context changes that there is potential for change. So I think we can kind of reset our sights in terms of making those bigger changes, and to try and create a society where active travel to school is the new normal, and driving direct all the way to the school gate does become unacceptable. As unacceptable as smoking at the school gate would be, or not wearing a mask in a public place has become unacceptable very quickly. Okay, next slide, please. So I was saying next week is Bike to School Week, starts on Monday, which we are working in partnership with Trust, who are speaking later as well. So the Bike to School Week highlights all the work that everybody's doing, helping cycling to school, but also more generally active travel to school, and also just helps to put a spotlight on the right of all children should have to be able to safely cycle to school. So I just wanted to highlight the resources and guidance available on the Sustrans website, so I can put a link in the chat a bit later. So we've got resources for schools in terms of daily activities to carry out in schools, and also a parent competition for everyone to take part in, or family competition. So yeah, that's all available on Sustrans website, and will be there'll be more things coming out through the press over at the start of next week. So it'd be great for everyone to take part in that, and we are always keen to work in partnership on Bike to School Week. Okay, so one of the things we have done through Bike to School Week, next slide please, is we commissioned some research with YouGov to understand the current situation and the impact that COVID-19 has had. These graphs are quite small, so I can talk you through some of the key points. The research will be released on Monday, so we can share it to this group as well, and that will be the full information. So this first chart just shows how people who responded to the survey were travelling to school before the lockdown. So this is pretty consistent with those National Travel Survey stats that Nick shared earlier. So 37% of people walking, so a bit higher, which is good. So hopefully that suggests a change. But obviously this is a much smaller sample. There's 20% by car, but there's also another 12% by car with a less than 10-minute walk to get to the school, and another 10% car with a 10-minute walk. So yeah, that does kind of add up to about just over 30%. Soberingly, there's the stats on cycling and scooting. Only 2% of pupils, or only 2% of parents, the survey was with parents, are cycling their children travel by bike to school, and 1% scooting. It's always, and that's similar stats in the National Travel Survey as well, which is always a kind of sobering reminder of the challenge we have. And I think we know as a sector the big difference we make in individual schools or within a cluster of schools as a project, but we haven't been able to make enough changes for that to be demonstrated on a national level. And I think that's something we need to be better at too. And in some of those different approaches that Nick was talking about earlier in terms of moving beyond encouraging active travel and to enable it through making it safe and restricting traffic. But I'll come on to that a bit more. So next slide, please. Okay, so this was asking people about their everyday habits during the COVID-19 pandemic. So on the far right-hand side, the light blue is the people that have increased the level of each mode. So 52% of people were walking more, and 17% of people were cycling more. So that is very encouraging. But there was also an increase in driving, which I hadn't expected. But I suppose that does also come from the 46% of people who are using public transport less, which is the bottom one. But yeah, so most people there was a big reduction in driving as well as an increase. Lots of people, no change. So I suppose this just confirms what the picture we all saw of an increase in walking and cycling, and confirms the findings from some other studies as well. So yeah, very pleasing, and it definitely shows the opportunity to increase active travel if we can make the other changes that are necessary. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this slide kind of shows two questions. One was asking people if they like or dislike the journey to school, and then what those reasons were. So what we found was that 13% of people disliked their journey to school. Most people are in that middle bit. They neither enjoy it or dislike it, and then 40% of people do enjoy it. So then we went on to ask people why, the people that don't enjoy it, why is that? And for most of those people, the reason was car traffic and congestion. So that biggest bar in that chart, 62%, the roads in my local area are congested, was the biggest factor. But also things like parking on pavement and dangerous junctions. So that is going to be one of the lead findings we're going that will be in the press release for next week. Okay, next slide, please. And there's lots of information here. Okay, so to be clear, the problem is car-dominated streets. So two images here of pretty terrible congestion, and also the challenges it creates to people to try and cross those streets and get about safely. No one would willingly be in those environments. But I think we're becoming clearer and clearer that this is the problem we need to be addressing, and it's and also clearer about the measures that are required to address this. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we asked people what would you need in order to help start walking or walk more often. And the things that people responded were safer crossings, widening pavements, banning motor vehicles on the road and banning pavement parking. Although lots of people just didn't know what would, or they didn't find anything, or none of the above. Okay, and the next slide, please. And then we asked the same question about cycling. So in these, the most popular results were segregated cycle routes, cycle storage at school, cycle training, and reducing the number of cars, and again, school streets or banning motor cars. So it's really interesting to see that there's a crossover on walking and cycling around those reducing traffic and banning cars. And I think it also shows there is a kind of general public support for amongst parents, and an awareness of, one is an awareness that banning cars and school streets is increasingly seen as an option, but and also public support for those measures. Not kind of overwhelming majority of support, but there is a level of support that we can build on in our work. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we then ask parents, if they think local authorities should be doing something. And this slide to me is really pleasing. So 71% of people agreed that local authorities should take these steps to make it easier to walk and cycle to school. So there, it's a really strong consensus for this, for the work that we're doing. And I think it's really important to know this, particularly when, if they know there's quite often local displeasure or local opposition to what we're trying to do. It's good to know that there is this underlying support for these actions, and I think we need to equip our local leaders with this information to give them the confidence to act, while of course listening to the opposition as well. Okay, so it's also interesting. There's the support is much higher in London than it is in other parts of the country, so it's not necessarily exactly the same everywhere, and so there is quite a lot of variation by region. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what Sustrans has been doing and what needs to be done. So I think what this research confirms to us in the direction we've been going is the need to be as active as possible outside the school gate. As Nick was saying, there is an opportunity for us all as a sector to keep doing the things which promote and encourage active travel, but also to be more active outside of the school in making it normal to travel actively and unacceptable to drive direct to the school gate. So we need to enable those safe journeys right up to the school gate, and particularly that last kind of 500 metres that Nick's highlighted through the walking bubbles. So during the lockdown, we moved a lot of our delivery online. So we delivered a programme called Outside In, which engaged parents directly in active travel, providing everyday activities for parents to carry out when they're homeschooling, which worked really well and engaged lots of parents. But now schools have gone back, our focus now as an organisation is on the ground delivery and supporting schools and local authorities to implement ambitious schemes and to make them work as successfully as possible. So that's where we are focusing at the moment. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as Nick said earlier, and I've just been saying, that it's this combination of interventions that's really important. So we need to keep doing the behavioural things, but it's the societal change, environmental changes that are, we need to be doing more of. And then we do have this opportunity at the moment to implement infrastructure changes. So we've got these temporary, so the infrastructure changes that we have an opportunity to implement at the moment include the temporary measures outside and around the schools, but we hope to be made permanent, more cycle routes, improved payments and crossing points, park and stride or park and ride, walking bubbles, which I love that idea, school streets that we all know about, and more 20 miles an hour and 20 miles an hour zones around all schools. So these, there's lots of emphasis on school streets, which is great, but I think in some places they haven't done the more straightforward steps and basic steps of really restricting parking and lowering speeds around schools, which also needs to happen in conjunction with restriction of traffic. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit on what we've been doing with school streets. So Sustrans, along with lots of other organisations, have been working really hard to make school streets to increase the visibility of school streets and to support local authorities to make it happen. So the training that Modeshift has been doing has been great, and we've been doing lots of work through our teams on the ground as well. So prior to the lockdown, there were around 130 school streets in the UK, but now there are over 430 planned, is the latest figure we are aware of. which is fantastic. So school streets are quickly becoming a mainstream intervention. So we are now at the point where restricting motor traffic is an acceptable measure and not as controversial as it would have been a few years ago. So this is a massive step forward. And is, we are operating in a new context now, and I think we need to take as much advantage of that as possible. So through implementing school streets, we've been learning a lot. We found that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So we do a lot of work on the ground, and each school street, each local authority, and each school is different, and we need to be, where we're working with schools, it's a bespoke intervention each time, and they do require the supporting behaviour change and engagement with the pupils and the parents to get that support for them, and to give people the option, to make sure people do have the skills and understanding to use alternative ways of getting to school, so they have access to bikes and able to use them, or are willing and see the benefit of walking and kind of understand the wider context behind them. But there is the support there. So we did a mass trial of school streets 2 years ago, and with 90% support from local residents and parents. So yeah, we would really encourage people to look beyond any immediate opposition and get the trials in, and if they're done well, they will be supported, and can be hugely beneficial in terms of creating a healthy space, and enable children to, it's a really transformative measure to enable children to safely get to school in their own steam. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've been doing quite a lot of work on supporting these temporary measures with local authorities around the country. So a couple of examples linked in the slides to Bradley Barton Primary in Newton Abbot and Devon, and Shirley Juniors in Southampton, where we've worked really closely with the local authority and the school to make it happen. Yeah, and there's information on our website, but we can share more information as well. So yeah, these new measures and powers that local authorities have do make it possible to get school streets in where it was much harder before. And I think if we can get them in as a trial now, the experience on the ground, I think, will be positive, and it can lead to permanent implementation. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please, Nick. Great. Okay, so one of the barriers to school streets that we were aware of over the last couple of years has been the question from local leaders and the public of, does implementing a school street just push the traffic elsewhere to the surrounding streets? So we have been trying to address this barrier by building that evidence base. So as school streets are new, it's been very difficult to get, for the evidence to be there, but this is an important part of that evidence that's required. So we've got some funding from the Road Safety Trust, and we're working with Adrian Davis and Birmingham City Council to get a really good understanding of this. So the first step in that, sorry, next slide, has been a extensive literature review by Adrian Davis. So in the research, we have found that in almost all cases, the number of motor vehicles reduced across both the roads that's closed and the neighbouring streets. So we did find what we were hoping to find, which was that it results in an overall reduction of traffic. It doesn't just displace all the traffic to the neighbouring streets, and the active travel levels increased at the schools with street closures. So it does result in a behaviour change of people changing their journeys to walking, cycling and scooting. Next slide, please. We also found that traffic displacement does not cause road safety issues of any significance on those surrounding streets, and that mitigating measures where needed have been applied successfully. Also, the perceived safety both on the closure streets and the surrounding streets has improved as active travel has increased, and that additional measures, additional parking schemes such as Park and Stride, can really help reduce traffic displacement, although a small number of badly parked school vehicles can remain an issue. So this is what we found in the literature review, but we're now going to work with Birmingham City Council as they implement school streets to get real life examples. So there's good evidence from the Edinburgh programmes and Camden programmes, but we want to build on that through looking at how it works in Birmingham, and particularly when looking at school streets implementation in kind of England outside of London is where the enforcement is more difficult. So that's why we were trying to work with a England city to get that evidence. Okay, final slide. Okay, so yeah, just to kind of a bit of a talk through what we've been doing and the opportunity that faces us. So yeah, we are at a time of flux, great opportunity that we can grasp to create a new normal. There is clear evidence, both from the kind of snapshot we've taken and lots of other things, that there is dissatisfaction with the status quo, and there is support for the changes we want to make. I think in some cases it's a silent majority, but we need to do more to build that case. And we need to keep being bold. We do need to keep encouraging active travel through promotions like Bike to School Week, and also all the work that we do on the ground, giving people motivation and skills, information to travel actively. But we also need to enable it through real change on the ground to make it safe. But this is not to say all of this will be easy. Change is hard. We know that. And Sustrans teams across the UK have the experience and skills to help local authorities and schools to plan and deliver effective programmes and schemes to make this happen successfully. So get in touch with us to talk through how we can help your local authority or school to implement these changes. That's all from me. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate it. Great presentations there. I'm just going to open to some questions. So I've got a couple in the chat. I'll read them out to you. Apologies on the slide, by the way, because Nick's cursor disappeared. So that's why there's.
Oh, you nodded off.
Okay. So some schools are reluctant to welcome increased pupil cycling due to resources needed for storage and security. Any persuasive solutions?
So I've just put a blog post in our from Sustrans website that we've written to try and help address this. So yeah, we have had a lot of reports, mixed reports actually. Some schools who have been able to implement extra storage and done great things to enable more people to travel actively, but also some schools that have banning anything coming onto the school site, including bikes or scooters. So in that blog, we've got some kind of persuasive arguments and hopefully solutions of what schools can do in terms of storage, cleaning bikes, and making it safe. So we think it is possible for it to be made safe, and also that the risks of allowing people to cycle and scoot, that the benefits outweigh the risks, which I'm sure we all agree. So we've got hopefully some arguments which will help with that on a local level, but also from a school level, I think the guidance that the government sent out was good in some ways in terms of encouraging schools to promote active travel, as strongly promoted, but schools are being asked to do a lot, aren't they? And we can understand this isn't necessary. Creating a safe environment within the school day will be their first priority. So yeah, we can definitely understand the issues. I think I would say just keep trying. That if once the schools have got people back in, and now they've been back in for a few weeks, they'll hopefully have those other measures they kind of know what they're doing with those other measures and making it safe, and then they'll be more willing to take the next steps and bring and allow things like walking, cycling, or allow cycling and scooting onto school. So yeah, I hope that helps answer the question.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. Do appreciate that. There's also a comment in the chat, which is probably more of an open discussion post from Rob, and it's they're hearing that schools have previously allowed scooting and cycling, and they've stopped it because they're struggling with or reluctant to resolve issues maintaining distancing. And he talks around the challenging circumstances. So they're finding it difficult to get interest in Bike School Week or promote active travel. He's also put in the chat there if anyone else is experiencing this and has anyone managed to change that. I don't know whether you've got a closing point to make on that, Chris, at all.
I think, yeah, we will try and provide more examples of schools that have done it well. So we've got a few blogs or a few examples on that, and if anyone else has some to share, I think that would be good to show that it can be possible. And yeah, just keep emphasising the benefits that it does have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, Chris, and thank you for the preparation. Obviously, do appreciate it, and I'm sure that's shared lots of insights. So, like I say, feel free to give Chris a shout at any point. Keep an eye out on the Sustrans channels as well, especially their blog content. Sounds like there's lots going out and moving forward. So what I'll do now is I'll hand on to our next presentation. Nick, if you could advance the slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Stephen Edwards, and he's presenting from Living Streets on the importance of walk to school. So, Stephen, over to you.
Great, thank you very much indeed. So I think a lot of the things I'm going to cover chime really well with the presentation we've just heard from Chris as well. To be able to see that we are singing on the same hymn sheet. Just quickly before I move on to my slides, I'm also, aside from being Director of Policy at Living Streets, I'm also Chair of Governors at a primary school in North London. So I'm aware of many of the issues that schools have faced and that local authorities have faced over the last few months. And everyone has done so well in adapting to what is a very different environment and a very difficult environment. So I think it's important to kind of thank you all for all the work you've done. And as Chris said, this is not changing at any point soon. So we all need to continue to adapt to very new ways of working and very different ways of working. So on to the next slide, please. So I'm sure many of you know Living Streets already, but just a couple of quick words about us to start off. And we're the UK charity for everyday walking, and our focus is on campaigning for better walking environments and to support people to walk more through our behavioural change programmes. A lot of this work is with schools, and I'll talk a little bit shortly about some of the programmes we've delivered in schools, but we've also had a number of campaigning successes in our 90-year history, including way back in the past, support campaigning for government to install the first zebra crossings, the first urban speed limits, and the first driving tests, believe it or not. And we're continuing with a lot of this work today, particularly focusing on getting a ban on pavement parking throughout the UK, and also on some important changes to the highway code to prioritise the needs of people walking and cycling over those driving, which I'll talk about later on in the presentation. So next slide, please. Most of our schoolwork is focused on WOW, which is our year-round walk to school challenge. And this is a fantastic programme, and it's got a cost-benefit ratio of 9:1. So for every £1 that's spent on it, there's a return of £9 if you count the health benefits. Now, it's important to say that those health benefits don't only accrue to children. The adults, the parents and carers walking to school with the children also benefit significantly from that short walk to the school gate. And of course, there are wider benefits in terms of reduced vehicle movements, in ensuring our streets are safer and in reducing air pollution around our schools. And we're currently working with over 2,000 primary schools on WOW to encourage more young children to walk to school. WOW's a badge reward scheme, and it's backed up by our award-winning travel tracker system, which allows schools to track the mode of travel of children to school, and on average has really strong results. We find that WOW schools see a 23% increase in children walking to school, and just as importantly, a 30% drop in cars driving right up to the school gates. We also work directly with the Department for Transport and a number of local authorities on the DFT's Walk to School outreach programme, and deliver some work getting more children to walk both to primary school and to secondary school through the Access Fund. And I know a number of local authorities that are on this call participate in those programmes. So on to the next slide, please. Chris talked about Bike School Week next week. After that, it's really an active travel fortnight, because the week after that, we've got Walk to School Week. Walk to School Week normally takes place in May, and during National Walking Month, and one of the difficult decisions we had to make when lockdown started was around postponing some of the activities we normally plan for National Walking Month. Clearly, Walk to School Week couldn't happen during May when we were locked down and children were homeschooling. So we made the decision to move Walk to School Week to October, which then coincides with International Walk to School Month as well. And we've been talking to our friends at Global Action Plan as well, who had Clean Air Day scheduled for earlier on in the year, and Clean Air Day will now be taking place on the Thursday of Walk to School Week. So there will be really a big opportunity there to emphasise the benefits of walking to school for local air pollution, and for much, much more as well. I know a number of local authorities and a number of schools will already have brought into the resources that we will be rolling out during Walk to School Week. There'll be a lot more coming up during the week in terms of some exciting research we'll be publishing, and also walks to school with various VIPs and others. So keep an eye out for that. And if you want to participate in it, or if you want any other support for Walk to School Week, do feel free to reach out to me after the presentation, and I'll be able to support you on that. So on to the next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about the school run quickly. Data released recently by the UK government, I think came out in August, in the National Travel Survey, as Nick was saying, showed that fewer children in England are walking to school. Now, it's important to say that this was a pre-lockdown picture. This was almost the last National Travel Survey published before we locked down, and it showed that 47% of children were walking to school, compared with 51% the year before and 53% the year before that. That's just for England, and the figure is lower in other parts of the UK where there are different challenges around kind of more rural environments. Alongside this, we know from various bits of research that children aren't achieving the right levels of physical activity, and amongst other health concerns, this is really contributing to children leaving primary school overweight or obese. So there's a big health problem, and the Walk to School is a way to address that challenge. But that's not all. There's also a really significant decarbonisation challenge at present, and the Department for Transport and other government departments are very focused on how that should be addressed. 28% of our domestic carbon emissions come from transport, and research we've conducted show that 1 in 4 cars in the morning peak are on the school run. So changing school transport has a massive potential to improve our health and support emission reduction as well. So the current school run just isn't helping our children grow healthily. It's also worth remembering, which chimes with some of the things we've been already discussing this morning, that there are so many journeys, not just school journeys, but other journeys that could easily be converted to active journeys by walking, cycling, scooting. In England, 20% of those who live within a mile of their primary school don't currently walk at the moment, which is quite shocking from my perspective. And these are journeys that we particularly encourage parents to walk or cycle or scoot. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and the work that we're doing has helped address some of those problems, but I think there are big challenges ahead and a lot more that we can be doing together. Now, next slide, please. Of course, it's impossible to talk about any of these issues without talking about the impact of COVID-19. And as we've all said on this call, things aren't changing at any point soon. There are big concerns about people getting on public transport still, and there is in many places a lack of space for social distancing around the school gate. So this highlights the need for action on school streets, and we completely agree with Sustrans that we need a big focus on addressing issues at the school gates. But of course, living with a poor air quality can further complicate COVID-19 symptoms. So it's vital at this time that parents don't respond to their concerns about social distancing or their concerns about public transport by jumping in their cars for that journey to school. UK government has so far responded positively. There's been extra funding in England to support coach and bus travel, as we mentioned earlier, but there's also been a significant investment in active travel that was made by the DfT back in May. This chimes with similar funding announcements made in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and it's fantastic to see all 4 nations of the UK pulling in the same direction on this. So there's a real opportunity to use the current positivity around walking and cycling to change this school run into a school walk, school cycle, or a school scoot. And there's some fantastic examples elsewhere in the world of countries doing things in a similar way. That we hear from our friends at the International Federation of Pedestrians and other illustrious forums. But we really do need to think about how we create that additional space around schools to ensure the school walk is safe from a COVID secure perspective, and to reduce the number of vehicles around our schools to improve on wider road safety and wider air quality as well. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. The other thing I think that's really concerning to us at Living Streets is how inequalities have been exacerbated by COVID-19. So whilst we all experienced lockdown, we didn't all experience it equally. There continue to be big inequalities in physical activity levels. Sport England's Active Live survey shows that older adults remain less active than younger adults, and this has worsened as a result of COVID. And people from lower socioeconomic groups remain less likely to be active than people from higher socioeconomic groups. And again, there's some evidence that this has been exacerbated by COVID-19 as well. So there's a big physical mobility challenge across our whole population, not just our schools. And I think this has some really important conclusions for our walking environments. It really highlights the need to us to be prioritising those short-term improvements to the walking environment we've already talked about, but also to ensure that those improvements are spread across all of our communities, not just our high streets and our leafy suburbs, and put some serious thought to how we can embed these for the long term. The Emergency Active Travel Fund is absolutely fantastic and is a great opportunity to push some of these measures forward, but it's critical to shape the stories around that and the stories around people benefiting from that in such a way that we can make the argument for embedding some of these changes into the long term. On to the next slide, please. So there is demand right now for ensuring that the changes we make benefit both walking and cycling. And for us, that basically points to two key measures that can be introduced. Chris has already spoken about school streets. School streets are absolutely critical in our view. We are working with a number of local authorities on introduction of them ourselves, and we would encourage people to look at these further. But school streets are more effective if they sit with other measures to improve safety, air quality, and other things around the school gates. Low traffic neighbourhoods is one such solution, so using modal filters to create neighbourhoods that are low traffic or traffic free, and lower speed limits are key as well, but also things like improving crossing facilities around schools as well, just to make it easier and safer for our children to get across the road. Now, it's impossible not to have noticed the fact there's lots of noise around these proposals at the moment as well. But survey data does show that there is a majority in favour of change. It's fantastic to see the data that Sustrans will be publishing next week, but also there's some stats from Bikers Best, and we'll have our own research coming out at some point soon, all of which shows there are high levels of support in local communities for encouraging walking and cycling, but there is a vocal minority that argues against some of these measures, and a need to address the need for kind of community consultation around some of them. So these are really important areas that we need to look at and think about going forward. On to the next slide, please. So from our perspective, the answer to addressing walking really does lie in a combination of behaviour change programmes such as WOW and infrastructure change such as school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods, speed limits, etc. Walking to school is free, it's easy, it's accessible. So combining good walking infrastructure and motivation with changes in current behaviour can really encourage boosts in walking and ensure that people are prioritising it. Next slide, please. So a few key things. First of all, I've mentioned better walking environments and the need for behavioural change programmes to inspire people to walk more. But one area that is really critical as well is supporting those families that are at home for various reasons. Now, I mentioned that we had to recalibrate a lot of the work we would have done around Walk to School Week early on in lockdown, and we developed some fantastic resources for families to encourage them to get out and be active during lockdown within the rules that had been set by government. And please do go to our website and have a look at those. We had a series of blog posts as well, our Walking Back from Home blog series, that really told stories from people across the country of how they were staying active during lockdown. And there's some great examples there from VIPs, but also from just ordinary people who face some of the challenges that we all face at that time. Now, with COVID not going away, it's clear that there are going to be there are already many classes within schools, many of those bubbles within schools that are kind of closing down temporarily because of the need to self-isolate because of COVID symptoms within their year group. So this is going to be a big challenge. And of course, there are millions of us across the country in some form of lockdown and facing some other restrictions at the moment, in addition to the restrictions the Prime Minister spoke about on Tuesday. So this is not an issue that's going to change at any point soon. We're likely to face more restrictions, if anything, in the months to come, and finding ways to stay physically active and support families that are at home is one of our key priorities going forward, and I'm sure you'd share that as a priority with me. So on to the next slide, please. Just want to finish by mentioning two other areas that I mentioned right at the beginning. Alongside all of these behavioural change programmes infrastructure change, we need to think about other things that will encourage walking. And there are two big areas we're looking at the moment. One is the highway code. The Department for Transport is currently consulting on changes to the highway code to introduce something called the hierarchy of responsibility into it, which will put the needs of more vulnerable road users, so pedestrians first, then cyclists, ahead of those road users that can cause more harm. So those in cars, those in heavy goods vehicles and others. The consultation the DFT is conducting is open till the 27th of October. I understand there's a huge number of responses to date, but please do make sure your voices are heard as part of that process. The other big area we're looking at the moment is pavement parking. Scotland introduced a ban on pavement parking last year, which will come into effect next year, and pavement parking has been banned in London for a number of years. And this is an issue. This is the issue that we hear more about than any other living streets. Elderly people who are blocked in their homes and feel unable to go out because of the fear of parked cars, parents with children forced into the road, into the path of oncoming vehicles. And it's a massive area that we've been campaigning on for years. And the good news is the Department for Transport is consulting on this at present, and their consultation is open on that till the 22nd of November. And I'm sure many local authorities will be participating in that consultation going forward as well. So last slide, please. So that's it for me. Any questions, burning issues that we should deal with now before the question session at the end? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. Some really good insight in there. Takeaway I've got is connecting schemes and the interventions, making sure that they're all working together, and that's building on Chris's point of being as active as possible outside the school gate. And that's not just from a scheme point of view. It could be active travel, actually physically moving. So that's great. Thank you. Any questions, please raise your hand. I'll put them in the chat. I've got a quick bit of time. I'm just going to find Emily here and make Emily's hopefully at the top of the list now. There we go. Okay, I can't see anything on there. If you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat afterwards and we can pick through. Equally, if there are any questions left in the chat, I will try and get those dealt with following the webinar. So I'd like to hand over to Emily now. Emily, are you there? Can you?
I'm here. Thanks, Adam.
There we go. So Nick, could you move the slides on, please? Fantastic. So I'm going to hand over to Emily from Bikeability Trust, and she's going to be giving us an update regarding the autumn and all of the great things that they've been working on. I know there's plenty going on when we last got up. So over to you, Emily.
Great, thanks Adam, and welcome. Nice to virtually see you all and the opportunity to kind of talk to you about what's happening for Bikeability and the Bikeability Trust over the autumn term. So as Adam said in the update there, it's been an incredibly busy summer for us at the Trust in supporting our providers and our grant recipients and our instructors to sort of manage and navigate the difficulties of COVID whilst thinking about the future of the programme as well. So I'm going to give you a bit of an update about that. But I firstly wanted to recognise just how excited we are about Bike to School Week next week and working with Sustrans. So I think we've got some great kind of press and potential opportunities to really sort of talk about those opportunities and excite people. And I'm very excited about it. And I'm actually going out on a visit next week as well, which will be very exciting, obviously COVID secure. So at the Bikeability Trust, we've been working really hard with all the government guidance, and on our professionals website, you'll see, and I think even if you're not delivering Bikeability, you're not involved directly in it, this is a very useful COVID addendum to our Bikeability delivery guidance that sets out the conditions through which cycle training can be delivered in a COVID secure way. And I wanted to start with that because I think it's a great piece of guidance. We've worked really hard on it. We are constantly keeping that updated. So as the situation moves and changes with any of the government guidance, so we work across the DCMS, Department for Health and Social Care, Department for Education and Department of Transport to keep that guidance absolutely up to date, to give that assurance that bikeability and cycle training can and should be happening in this period. And just to also reassure you as well, and it's something that we are now suggesting to local providers to make sure that they have shared with schools, is we do have a signed off statement by Department for Transport and Department for Education to assure, and it was particularly for insurance, to ensure that bikeability can happen if you follow the delivery guidance, if you're following that COVID addendum, to reassure local school leaders that department and government is content that we have put everything in place to make that COVID secure. So I think those things are really important. What we're likely to do in the next couple of weeks is also issue a one-pager for schools, sort of reiterating that government assurance, and then where they can find the information about making bikeability COVID secure. So starting to tell you about that. But we're also realistic. We've also heard, as the second point on the slide says, that there's quite a mixed picture of delivery out there. It's important for me to say from the outset that bikeability hasn't stopped. We've had bikeability happening across the summer. We've had lots of catch-up classes of groups individually with children. We've also launched, designed and developed a whole new bikeability family course over the summer period, which we've written to grant recipients last week, and we're now offering, so probably about 10,000 families will be able to access. So it's 10,000 individuals within families. It's 2,500 families in total will be able to get Bikeability Family over the rest of the remainder of the financial year. So really excited that we were able to offer that. But we've also heard from about 60% of our grant recipients that sort of bikeability delivery before the October half term, school leaders are nervous. They are nervous about offering. They are, for all the reasons that you've heard in previous presentations about bringing bikes onto school, about the cleaning, about additional visitors coming into the school. There is a level of nervousness, and we accept that that's certainly something that's going to be very difficult for providers to navigate over this period. But that's not the whole picture. We've also heard from 10% of our providers that actually they are so fully booked they can't cope with the demand coming in from school leaders before this October half term. So we've got a very, very, very mixed picture of delivery out there, but bikeability absolutely is and can be happening right now in schools and with families as well. So whilst we're continuing to work on all this work around COVID and supporting our delivery partners and our instructors, we've also, across this summer period, had to develop up what we were initially calling the universal offer, but I think we're going to start calling it Bikeability for All now. So as you know, in the summer, the Prime Minister launched his Walking and Cycling Action Plan, which contained lines in it regarding cycle training, offering a commitment to offer cycle training to all adults and all children. Just to reassure you, the only reason that bikeability was not mentioned as the children's version was because we're doing some research at the moment around whether bikeability as a brand also works for adults. But bikeability is the government's programme for cycle training, and they are absolutely committed to its delivery at a universal level, universal offer. So what we've done at the Trust across the summer is we have developed up an ambition bid, which is now with Department for Transport. I've discussed it with ministers, I've discussed it with officials, and that is going into the department's spending review process. So we are right now in the middle of negotiating on how can we develop up bikeability to offer to every adult and to every child, and what that universal offer will look like. Essentially, what we will be doing over the next sort of 3 years is a programme of evolution. We think it's time to evolve bikeability to deliver it in a more modern and more flexible way, to be able to test that in the second year, and then to be able to embed that to be able to offer to all children and all adults in the future. So I've brought in 2 new project directors who will be working with me over the next 6 months to develop up a roadmap to what that universal offer looks like. So what does that look like at Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, 3, 4, Bikeability Family and Bikeability for adults as well. And we will be doing significant stakeholder engagement. So future webinars where we can consult and talk to you about the plans for the universal offer. And certainly we'll be setting up an advisory group and working across the industry to make that a universal offer with the right roadmap, so that we really get Bikeability to be the household name and its ability to be able to deliver to every child by 2024. So it's a hugely exciting time, but all of this depends on what we get in the spending review. So what will the revenue envelope look like in the spending review to be able to deliver the PM's ambition for every child and every adult? So very exciting time. And I'm, if you want to get involved in developing our thinking about the universal offer, please do send me, drop me a line, send me an email, and we're really keen to hear everybody's views. So that's the universal offer. Then the fourth thing that I really wanted to talk in much more depth and kind of show you is something that we're really excited about. We've been developing what we're calling tools for schools. So a whole set of cross-curriculum resources, both for schools and for parents, which we are now live on the Bikeability website, and we are starting to promote directly to schools and through to our providers. And this was very much for the kind of the autumn term return, to have a whole new set of actual physical resources that you can use to promote bikeability in cycling. So Nick, if you can go to the next slide. We'll wait for Nick to find his cursor again to move us on. There we go. I can see the cursor moving. Tools for Schools is this fantastic suite of resources that we've got to really help to showcase the best of bikeability, to encourage greater take-up, to start to encourage, which is one of our ambitions for the universal offer, that we have more cross-curriculum opportunities to talk about cycling, and to use this absolute hook of this the government's funded cycle training programme to support all key stages. At the moment, the resources we've got are from early years up to key stage 3, but we will be looking at some kind of key stage 4 resources as well eventually down the track. It's also great tools to promote and celebrate bikeability training and the achievements that you can make, the skills, the confidence that children will get. And then as well, we've also done some resources that support homeschool engagement, so resources for parents as well. So Nick, if you can go to the next slide. So I've put up on these slides lots of examples in a minute of some of the resources that you can see, but we're really wanting to embed how cycling and cycle training can be absolutely cross-curriculum activities. It's life skills, it's PSHE or relationship and health education when that comes in from next year. It's about citizenship, it's about physical activity, and we're giving teachers and schools just a whole suite of fantastic resources, which I'm going to show you a little bit more of, from posters and leaflets to curriculum learning resources to really creative tools and presentations, as just an absolute wealth of resources that we've been able to develop here. And all of them have been developed in consultation with teachers and families. We're also looking for, we're doing some pilot work around special educational needs and disability, and we'll be looking at the resources again and producing other versions around SEND over the next few months as well. So if you can go to the next slide, Nick. So just to give you an idea of what some of the promotional things look like, so schools can download and put these up. So we've got top tips boards, we've got certificates, we've got posters that can be displayed before Bikeability is kind of coming out, that could be used in school assemblies. Just huge amounts of resources that really help children to understand what this programme, when it comes in, is going to be like for them. And we've also really stripped down and helped to understand what the levels of Bikeability, so exactly what they'll be learning when our instructors come in and train them. So it really helps to sort of warm up the school community to understanding what they're going to get when Bikeability comes in, as well as lots of different sort of social media gifs and other congratulations things that can be sent out via parent mail or whatever parent system the school is using afterwards as well. So lots of different promotional materials. If you can go to the next slide, Nick. We've also then got the learning resources. So as I said earlier, these are cross-curriculum. So you've got science opportunities. How does cycling kind of affect heart rates and bodies, and scientific experiments. You've got really good sort of geography lessons around kind of cycling in the world, and early years activity cards as well that we've produced. So it's a really great sort of curriculum resources that teachers can just download and then use in the classroom, either ahead of Bikeability coming in or just as part of their sort of wide curriculum delivery throughout the year. If you can go to the next one, Nick. And one of the things that we've heard really clearly from sort of parents, carers and schools over the years is that they wanted a little bit more of a sort of a sense to either send out to parents to engage their school community, or to really understand what they're getting when they book in a Bikeability session is some case studies. So we've pulled these up. We've worked with some individuals from a participant's perspective, from a local authority perspective, from cycling instructors perspective, and from schools in perspective, and developed up these case studies. We are on the lookout for more case studies. So if you're involved in Bikeability, if you're delivering some fantastic Bikeability resources, then please do absolutely want to get involved with us. We'd love to hear and develop up some more case studies. We're very, very, very keen to promote case studies across to our provider network. So if you've got one, please share it with us, and we'd be really keen to put those out as well. If you go to the next slide, Nick. And then we've got finally the final set of resources that we've developed so far are family activities. These are, we've already got sort of parental packs that can be purchased and then can be taken home, so that parents can understand what their children have been taught, and then how to sort of support and progress them through their cycling journey. But we've now also developed some sort of fun activities that can be taken home. Some of them are about sort of explaining the cycling landscape in a little bit more, like the Tour de France one that's about kind of jersey colours. Other ones are sort of games that they can play with the children, as well as sort of safety tips and tools as well, on how to sort of fix your bike and road signs, and things like that. So I hope what you can see is what we've developed is an absolute whole suite of resources to really start to effectively explain Bikeability and what we're doing, to really try and improve brand understanding of what Bikeability is, and help parents to see that what the value of what their children are doing in school, and then help support the school community to be able to embed cycle training as part of curriculum delivery, which is something that we will be pushing for at a policy level, because we strongly believe we can't reach a universal offer and reach every child until cycle training is actually on the national curriculum as a statutory requirement in the same way that swimming is. So we will definitely continue to push that point as well. So that was sort of pretty much most of the things that I wanted to sort of run you through. They're on the Bikeability website. So Nick, if you pull up the last slide, the Bikeability website is there. It's got its dedicated Tools for Schools session. We've got some press launch and other materials going out into the press just at the end of Bike to School week and in the week after that as well. And we're really keen to hear any other potential case studies and testimonials that you could do us. But if you could really help us to spread the word about Tools for Schools, get this out to schools that you're working with, we'd be really grateful for the support and the help. So I can see there's some questions coming in already, Adam.
Yes, there are indeed. Thank you very much for that. Very thorough presentation. So I'll get straight into it. There is one from Rob. Any thoughts around scootability integrated with bikeability, especially given the ease and great opportunities to scoot on the pavement, especially at the younger age, the relative ease of learning to scoot, and especially in light of reluctance to cycle in the road and interpretation of the law around cycling on the pavement, etc.
Yeah, so Rob, it's a really interesting question. It's a great question to be asking right now, because we've got the opportunity to be thinking about what does a universal offer look like, and does a universal offer include scooterability is a question that we'll need to ask as we develop this up. So I will take that back to David Shannon, who many of you may know from Islington Borough Council. So David Shannon's now joining us 2 days a week at the Trust as Project Director on the universal offer, and we have Julia Ewins as well, who's coming in 1 day a week. So I've got two project directors who are now working up what does the universal offer look like, what are all the programmes that need to sit underneath for all children's ages, that we can secure resources to be able to run. So Rob, I'll take it back to them and they'll look at it. No promises though that we'll guarantee that we'll get it, but we're very open to hearing what you think needs to be in a bikeability programme.
Cool, thank you, Emily. Are there any more questions in the chat? There's a few really positive comments in there as well around the resources. So make sure that you head over to the Bikeability Trust website have a good look. There's lots on there, and like I said, they've been certainly working hard with the amount of resources that are there. So that's brilliant. What we'll do is, if you do have any questions and it comes in after the webinar, I will try and forward them on, and we can get those dealt with, if that's all right.
I can just see one from Michael Kitchen, Key Stage Key Stage 3 resources. So we're just looking again at all the other additional resources that we need. I can't promise we're going to get done this side of Christmas with just everything else that the trust is working on, but it's absolutely in our plans to do more for Key Stage 3. I've just commissioned some more work in this area. I'm not convinced that the Bikeability brand works for Key Stage 3. I'm not convinced that it works for adults either currently. So we are looking at that. We're actively looking at it. And one of the things that we've put into the universal offer potential sort of ambition bids for Key Stage 3 is to start to deliver some of Bikeability for Key Stage 3 by virtual reality. And a big VR program, so harnessing something that teenagers get quite excited about. And I worked with DFE a couple of years ago on a VR welding program for welding apprenticeships, so I've got quite a lot of experience in that area. So I just wanted to pause on making some absolute Key Stage 3 resources until we'd got some sort of feedback on whether or not Bikeability as a brand is just seen as too much of a primary school brand and doesn't resonate much with the Key Stage 3 audience yet. So, but we're looking at it. We're definitely looking at it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So big thank you to Emily. Would normally be giving you a round of applause, obviously, in the Modeshift convention style, but obviously I'd like to take this moment to say a massive thank you to all of our presenters. There is so much going on, and I think the overriding theme that I see that's come about throughout all of these is linking everything together. You know, it's not about delivering in isolation. Obviously, there's people with key focuses on what they need to be delivering and doing in their local area. But, you know, again, it's building on that team ethos, that team Modeshift idea, you know, about a collective group of people working on things to a similar aim. And we've certainly, whilst the COVID-19 situation has caused huge amounts of issues for people all over the country, you know, it has put transport on the agenda, and it has put things that we as professionals need to work on in terms of trying to support social distancing, support the government guidance, but ultimately help people get to school in this case, you know, help people access education, and maybe hopefully give them the confidence to walk or cycle or take an active mode to school, especially when pressures on public transport are there. So on behalf of Modeshift, big thank you to Chris, Emily and Stephen. Really, really appreciated. Like I say, we have recorded this webinar and we will be sharing it after the event. Give us some time to do that. That'll be appreciated. And also we will be sharing the presentations. The next webinar is in 2 weeks' time. 10 AM on the Friday, so please make sure you come. There he is. Nick's put that slide in there for me. Thank you, Nick. So it's planning for sustainable travel, and we're just finalising the agenda, the final sort of presentation with speakers at present. And basically, what we're doing with these webinars is we are running them fortnightly, with a gap in the webinars for the Modeshift AGM, which is actually on the Thursday, on the 5th of November, and it's in the afternoon. So, like I say, we'll be sending all the emails, all the information out in email. Everyone, if you've received the email today for this webinar, you will get that information that will come out to that mailing list. So there's nothing extra that you need to do in order to do that. Please make a quick scribble down of those notes in the diary. And what I'll do is I'll close the webinar now, but we'll let you just sort of filter out as and when you need to, so you can make a note of those dates on there. Okay. Thank you very much. Emily has just put an email in there, by the way, if anyone wanted to feed into the universal offer. Okay, thank you very much for your time, everybody. I wish you a pleasant day, and I look forward to catching you up with you next time. Thank you.